We have an economic situation where making luxury items which are not everyday use items is the first thing you cut out. So it didn't take us too long to take a sanity check to realize our business model looked a bit flimsy. So we had to change. So we decided to try and look at what we were good at and try and see where that might have a market. We had a client, or we still have a client, should I say, which is a bank called HSBC. I was very kindly by a friend of mine introduced to the guy who looks after what they call their group corporate marketing. And HSBC is a huge sponsor of events, whether it be golf, sports of other kind, or cultural events. And they're a very visible bank in that area. So I got a client, and at the time, this was 3 years ago, they were one of the sponsors of an event that used to be played down at Wentworth, which was called the World Match Play. Limited player tournament, about 20 players, but obviously a very useful event for them, for their corporate clients. So I came up with an idea that on their client days, which is previous obviously to the actual professional tournament, that we should run an event for them going back in time. So we ran a Hickory event with the clothes and everything, and their clients loved it. I mean, the biggest problem, if anybody's in the event business, is what do you do to get the client to turn up when he's invited probably by a huge number of them? What's going to make him turn up to your one as opposed to the one he gets the next day? And in London, the idea of going to play golf probably was getting a little bit tired. But the idea of going along and playing in a historical golf day had a little different touch to it. So they loved the idea. They had a fantastic turnout. All the pros actively got involved, which added a lot to it. So they said to me, well, can you replicate this? Because we also do it another tournament. And I thought, great. Here's me thinking, I've done it in London. There must be another event probably somewhere else in England. And he said, no, it's in Shanghai. Logistically, it became a bit more awkward. Shanghai, because China is really getting into golf. Not because it's golf, but the Chinese are getting into golf because they view golf as a great way to learn about Western etiquette. And golf is a good sport for teaching you how to behave properly. And they see golf as a way for them to learn. So corporate golf in China is hugely important. So Shanghai for them was 100 times more important than the World Match Play, which actually they proved by dropping it the following year. They no longer sponsor the event, but they still sponsor the event in Shanghai. We ran it in Shanghai. The Chinese, to be honest, didn't know what they were doing. I mean, this was completely alien to them, but that's why it was appealing. I mean, we had a laugh because when we were talking to them about it, they didn't realize that before they had graphite, you had steel. So when I told them that before steel you had wood, this really surprised them. But they really got into it because they're very enthusiastic. They loved it, and he said, well, okay, we've done it, we want to do it again, and we want to do it at our ladies event, and that's in Singapore. So it sort of went on from there, and it was getting a bit of sort of traction. So the following year I went back to him and said, okay, what would you like us to do this year? And he said, well, we don't want to do the same thing, which is understandable. What else can we do? And as a traditional club maker, I was a bit stumped as to what else we could do. And he said, well, how would you like to design for us a display which we would house in our very privileged corporate hospitality area? They have all different levels of corporate hospitality, from the guy who just has his Visa card to the guy who has the one that the card walks in itself. And basically they wanted to do a display in that area. So I thought this is exactly the right sweet spot for us. So I came up with an idea to do, imagine it was about that size of that wall there. Basically a potted history of golf, the clubs that were involved, the evolution of where it moved and why it moved. And came up with the idea and sent it to them as a draft. He said, fantastic idea, we'd like to do it. The good thing that came out of it was that we learned that actually this kind of display stuff, there's a market for it. And the nice thing about us is that once you've done the copywriting and you've done your basic stuff, you can keep reusing it. You just change it a little bit, but the basic concept works. Also, because we make the products that populate the display, instead of getting involved and saying, okay, what's the price of one product? You're out of that business. You're in the business of saying, right, I contracted that display, £30,000 per se. You're in a different business altogether. And it keeps the factories turning over. So it had a lot of positives to it. So we then started looking at other opportunities to try and do this. And the biggest opportunity for us was in places where golf was still being built. And that's obviously limited now because most of the developed economies are not building at the moment. And secondly, they were in markets where there's probably not a lot of heritage about golf. So what they're looking for is, instead of having a module that says, right, that's what it looks like, however nice it is, I might want mine to have a little bit of history to it. And that's where we could come in.